The late evening silence in Emily Reynolds' home was shattered by the ringing of her phone. She glanced at the screen to see Chloe's name flashing. Picking up, she immediately recognized the panic in her sister's trembling voice. "Emily," Chloe whispered, her words barely audible over her labored breathing, I need your help. They said I need surgery. Without it, Her voice broke, the weight of the unspoken words crushing her. Emily's heart pounded as she listened, her mind racing through the implications. "What's going on? Tell me everything," she urged. Chloe explained her diagnosis, a rare condition requiring urgent surgical intervention. With no insurance to cover the cost, Chloe was out of options. Her voice cracked as she added, "I can't leave Bella without a mother, Emily. I can't." The image of her niece, Bella, crying beside a hospital bed flooded Emily's mind, igniting a fierce determination. She promised Chloe she'd find a way, even as a sinking feeling in her stomach warned her of the battle she'd face at home. Hanging up, Emily leaned against the wall, her breath shaky. She knew what she had to do, but Daniel's rigid grip on their finances loomed like a shadow. The following morning, Emily sat across from Daniel at breakfast, carefully choosing her moment. The children were outside, and the calm of the household seemed an illusion, fragile and fleeting. "Daniel," she began softly, "I need to talk to you about something important." Without looking up from his laptop, Daniel muttered, "What is it?" His tone was dismissive, and Emily hesitated, feeling the chasm between them widen. She explained Chloe's condition and the urgency of her surgery, pleading for Daniel to understand. "She has no one else, Daniel. If we don't help her, she might not survive." Daniel snapped the laptop shut, his expression darkening. "And what about us, Emily? What about our plans? Our savings aren't there to bail out someone who can't manage their own life," he said coldly. Emily flinched at his words but pushed on, her voice trembling. "It's not about plans, it's about saving a life. Please, Daniel, just this once." But his response was swift and cutting. "If you touch that money, you'll regret it. Do you understand me?" he said, his tone low and final. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air, and as Daniel left the room, Emily felt tears sting her eyes. Torn between loyalty to her husband and her sister's desperate need, she sat paralyzed by the weight of the choice before her. Emily spent sleepless nights replaying the conversation with Daniel. Each moment magnified her dilemma, the stakes growing heavier with each passing hour. Chloe's condition worsened, her voice growing weaker in their daily calls. Emily couldn't bear the thought of losing her sister or leaving Bella without a mother. One morning, driven by desperation, Emily made her decision. She arrived at the bank just as it opened, her hands shaking as she filled out the withdrawal slip. The teller handed her the cash with a polite smile, unaware of the storm brewing behind Emily's eyes. Clutching the envelope tightly, she drove straight to the hospital, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. As Emily handed over the payment, relief washed over her. Chloe was prepped for surgery within hours, and Emily stayed by her bedside, holding her hand. Watching the machines beep steadily, Emily felt a momentary peace. She had done the right thing, saved her sister's life. But the relief was fleeting, shadowed by the storm awaiting her at home. The storm hit that evening. Daniel discovered the withdrawal while reviewing their bank account. His face turned ashen, then crimson with rage. "Emily," he roared, bursting into the living room where she sat folding laundry. "What have you done?" He waved the bank statement in her face, his hand trembling. Emily rose, meeting his fury with as much composure as she could muster. "I saved my sister's life," she said firmly. She had no one else. But her resolve only seemed to fuel his anger. "You betrayed me!" Daniel shouted, his voice echoing through the house. "That money wasn't yours to spend. Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" "I did what I had to do," Emily replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Chloe's life was worth more than any savings account. Daniel laughed bitterly, his eyes narrowing. "You've ruined everything, Emily. Don't expect me to forgive this." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, leaving Emily standing alone, the weight of his words crushing her. The tension in the Reynolds household was palpable, each day more strained than the last. When Daniel's colleagues invited them to a dinner party, Emily hoped it would offer a reprieve. But as the evening unfolded, she realized Daniel had other plans. Over the main course, he casually began recounting the recklessness of his wife. "Can you believe she spent our savings without even consulting me? Thought she'd play hero with our hard-earned money," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The table fell silent, the other guests exchanging awkward glances. Emily's face burned with humiliation. "It was for my sister's surgery," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel scoffed, raising his glass. "And what about our family? What about our future?" he retorted. The words hung in the air, suffocating and sharp. Unable to endure the shame, Emily excused herself and fled to the restroom. Tears streamed down her face as she gripped the sink, her reflection a reminder of the strength she struggled to find. This was not the man she had married, and the life she had built felt like it was crumbling around her. The silence between Emily and Daniel turned into a vast chasm, colder and more hostile with each passing day. Daniel's contempt became more overt, from dismissive glances to sharp-edged remarks that cut deeper than any argument. One evening, as Emily attempted to address the children's needs, Daniel interrupted her with a final declaration. "I can't do this anymore," he said coldly. "You've destroyed the trust in this marriage. Pack your things and leave." Emily stared at him, stunned. "You can't be serious, Daniel. This is our home. Our children's home," she pleaded. But his icy expression didn't waver. "Take them if you want." "I don't care anymore," he replied, his tone devoid of emotion. Packing her belongings felt surreal, like a dream slowly unraveling into a nightmare. As Emily folded Lily's favorite pajamas and Evan's stuffed animal, their confused questions broke her heart. "Why are we leaving, Mommy?" Lily asked, her wide eyes brimming with tears. "It's just for a little while," Emily lied, her voice trembling as she hugged her children tightly. Chloe's apartment was modest, a two-bedroom unit barely large enough for her and Bella. Yet, when Emily showed up with her children and suitcases in tow, Chloe welcomed them without hesitation. "This is your home now, as long as you need it," Chloe said firmly, wrapping Emily in a tight hug. Emily struggled to adjust to her new reality. Nights were spent on Chloe's living room couch, listening to her children's soft breaths as they slept beside her. She couldn't shake the feeling of failure, her mind replaying every moment that led to this point. Guilt weighed heavily on her. She had saved Chloe's life, but at what cost to her own family? Chloe, still recovering from her surgery, did her best to uplift Emily. "You did the right thing, Em. Don't let Daniel make you feel otherwise," she said one evening as they shared tea at the kitchen table. Emily nodded, but the ache in her chest remained. The warmth of Chloe's support was a small comfort against the cold reality of her situation. One evening, as Emily sorted through her belongings, Chloe hesitated by the doorway, holding an envelope. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice uncertain. Inside the envelope were papers Chloe had stumbled upon years ago during a visit to Daniel's office. The documents detailed unexplained financial transactions tied to Daniel's name, some with amounts far larger than their savings account ever held. Emily's eyes widened as she read through the papers. "What is this?" she asked, her voice shaking. Chloe shrugged, her expression conflicted. "I didn't know what to make of it at the time, so I kept it. But after everything he's done, I thought you should see it." The implications hit Emily like a tidal wave. Was Daniel hiding money? Or worse, involved in something illegal? The pieces didn't fully connect, but they raised more questions than answers. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with possibilities. Emily hesitated for days, unsure of what to do with the documents. Finally, she sought advice from Chloe, who insisted she take them to a lawyer. With Chloe's encouragement, Emily met with Rachel Carter, a sharp and empathetic attorney recommended by a mutual friend. Rachel listened intently as Emily recounted her story and presented the documents. As Rachel flipped through the pages, her expression grew serious. "Emily, these suggest financial fraud. If we can verify their authenticity, they could strengthen your case in a divorce and potentially expose Daniel to legal consequences," Rachel explained. The thought of going to court terrified Emily. The idea of dragging her family through a legal battle felt overwhelming, but Rachel's words resonated. "You've already fought to save your sister. Now it's time to fight for yourself and your children," Rachel said, her voice firm yet kind. Emily nodded, a flicker of determination igniting within her. Emily filed for divorce, citing emotional distress, financial misconduct, and custody concerns. The decision felt both liberating and terrifying. Daniel responded with venom, accusing Emily of fabricating evidence and trying to manipulate the system. His legal team painted her as impulsive and reckless, weaponizing her decision to use the savings against her. The first court appearance was overwhelming. Emily sat across from Daniel, her heart pounding as his attorney leveled accusations. She acted without consultation, jeopardizing the family's future, he argued, his voice confident and sharp. Emily clenched her hands under the table, resisting the urge to cry. Rachel countered with precision, presenting the documents as evidence and questioning Daniel's financial integrity. The judge, a stern but fair man, seemed intrigued by the allegations, requesting further review. As Emily left the courtroom that day, she felt both drained and invigorated. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Emily entered, clutching Rachel's notes in one hand and her own resolve in the other. Across the room, Daniel sat with his lawyer, his expression cold and unreadable. Emily's heart raced as the judge called the proceedings to order. This wasn't just a battle over money, it was a fight for her children's future and her own dignity. Rachel began her opening statement with a firm yet compassionate tone. "This case is about trust, betrayal, and the consequences of one man's deception. My client, Mrs. Reynolds, has faced unjust accusations while trying to protect her family," she declared. The judge nodded, motioning for Daniel's lawyer to proceed. Daniel's attorney wasted no time. Mrs. Reynolds acted impulsively, endangering her family's financial stability. "She is incapable of making sound decisions," he argued, his words sharp and cutting. Emily bit her lip, determined not to let his accusations shake her. She knew the truth, and she trusted Rachel to bring it to light. The hardest day of the trial came when Lily and Evan were brought into the courtroom. Emily's heart ached as her children, dressed in their best clothes, sat nervously in the witness stand. "Lily, can you tell the court about your life with your mom?" Rachel asked gently, kneeling slightly to meet the girl's eyes. Lily hesitated before speaking, her small voice echoing in the room. "Mommy always takes care of us. She makes us feel safe," she said, clutching the edge of the stand. Daniel's attorney rose, his tone overly friendly. "And your dad? Doesn't he take care of you too?" he asked, a sly smile on his lips. Lily shifted uncomfortably. "Daddy used to, but he's always angry now," she murmured. Evan, too young to articulate much, simply said, "I want to stay with Mommy." Their words sent a wave of emotion through the room, leaving Emily both heartbroken and resolute. After court adjourned, she hugged them tightly, whispering, "You did so well. Mommy's so proud of you." The next day, Chloe took the stand. She recounted the night Emily chose to save her life, emphasizing the selflessness of her sister's actions. "Emily gave up everything for me, even knowing it might cost her marriage," Chloe said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Rachel guided Chloe carefully through her testimony, shifting to the documents she had uncovered. "Can you explain how you found these records?" Rachel asked. Chloe described stumbling upon them in Daniel's office and the unease they had caused her. "I didn't understand them fully at the time, but I knew something wasn't right," she admitted. Daniel's lawyer attempted to discredit her. "Isn't it true you've benefited financially from Mrs. Reynolds' decision? Wouldn't you say you're biased?" he asked, his tone accusatory. Chloe didn't flinch. "Emily saved my life, yes. But this case isn't about me, it's about Daniel's deception and the harm it's caused his family," she replied firmly, silencing the room. When Daniel took the stand, the courtroom bristled with anticipation. He presented himself confidently at first, speaking in calculated tones. "I acted in the best interest of my family. Emily's actions were reckless, and I was left to clean up the mess," he declared. Rachel rose for cross-examination, her questions pointed. "Mr. Reynolds, can you explain these transactions?" she asked, holding up the documents Chloe had uncovered. Daniel hesitated, his composure faltering for the first time. "Those were private investments," he said, his voice tight. Rachel pressed on. "Private? Using funds from your family's savings without your wife's knowledge? Would you call that trust?" The courtroom murmured as Daniel struggled to respond. His evasiveness only fueled the suspicion in the judge's eyes. Emily watched with a mix of relief and sorrow. This was the man she had once trusted with her life, now exposed for who he truly was. By the midpoint of the trial, Rachel had effectively shifted the narrative. The judge's questions grew sharper, aimed at Daniel and his attorney. Meanwhile, Emily's strength shone through as she detailed the sacrifices she had made for her family, countering every accusation with truth and poise. Rachel introduced additional evidence, including testimonies from neighbors and friends who vouched for Emily's character. "Emily has always been a devoted mother and a selfless sister," one coworker said. "Her decision to save Chloe wasn't impulsive, it was brave." Daniel's attorney grew visibly frustrated, his strategies crumbling under the weight of Rachel's arguments. Emily, for the first time in months, felt a flicker of hope. As court adjourned for the day, Rachel leaned over and whispered, "We're getting there, Emily. Stay strong." And for the first time, Emily believed it. As the trial entered its final phase, Daniel's lawyer called a surprise witness to the stand, Lauren, a former friend of Emily. Emily's heart sank as Lauren took her seat, her posture confident and her expression laced with disdain. Rachel leaned in and whispered, "Stay calm. I'll handle this." Lauren began her testimony with a syrupy tone that barely masked her contempt. "Emily has always been impulsive," she said, glancing smugly in Emily's direction. "Back when we were friends, she would make reckless decisions and expect others to clean up her mess." Her words stung, and Emily clenched her fists under the table, her composure threatening to crack. When Rachel stood to cross-examine, her voice was sharp and unwavering. "Lauren, how long has it been since you and Emily were close?" she asked. Lauren hesitated. "Years," she admitted. "So, you're testifying about someone you haven't had a meaningful relationship with in years? And during that time, you've had no insight into her life as a wife or mother?" Rachel's questions unraveled Lauren's credibility, and by the time she stepped down, her words had lost their sting. The courtroom atmosphere shifted when Rachel called several of Emily's neighbors and co-workers as witnesses. Each of them painted a vivid picture of Emily's character, describing her as a devoted mother, a compassionate friend, and a tireless worker who always put others first. "She's the kind of person who brings soup to a sick neighbor, even when she's struggling herself," one coworker testified. Another added, her decision to help her sister wasn't reckless. It was courageous. She put her family's values above material things. Their words filled Emily with a warmth she hadn't felt in months. Daniel's lawyer attempted to discredit them, but their consistent accounts left little room for doubt. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs of admiration for Emily. For the first time, she felt the tide turning, her integrity shining through the fog of accusations Daniel had tried to create. After weeks of testimony, the judge called for a brief recess before delivering his remarks. Emily sat in the hallway, her hands trembling as she gripped Rachel's arm. "Do you think it's enough?" she whispered. Rachel nodded confidently. "You've shown the truth, Emily. That's what matters most." When court resumed, the judge addressed both parties, his tone measured but firm. "This case is not just about financial decisions or legal contracts. It's about the foundation of trust and accountability within a family," he said. His eyes moved between Emily and Daniel, lingering on the latter. "The evidence presented has made it clear that one party acted with selflessness and integrity, while the other sought to deceive for personal gain." Emily's breath caught as the judge's words sank in. Though the verdict was yet to come, his observations hinted at a growing favor toward her side. With the trial nearing its conclusion, Daniel took the stand again, this time to defend his financial decisions. His tone was defensive, his words rehearsed. "I made those investments to secure a better future for my family," he claimed, attempting to portray himself as a misunderstood provider. Rachel stood for cross-examination, her questions precise and unrelenting. "Mr. Reynolds, were these investments discussed with your wife?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, his confidence faltering. "Not directly," he admitted. Rachel pressed further. "So, you made unilateral decisions with shared finances, all while accusing your wife of being impulsive? Would you call that trust?" The courtroom was silent as Daniel struggled to respond. His polished exterior began to crack, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "She doesn't understand how hard I work for this family," he snapped, his voice rising. The judge frowned, and Rachel seized the moment. "And yet, she was the one holding this family together while you kept secrets," she said calmly, driving her point home. The final day of testimony brought a sense of anticipation. Rachel presented her closing arguments with a mix of passion and poise, summarizing the sacrifices Emily had made and the truths that had come to light during the trial. Mrs. Reynolds' decision to save her sister's life was not impulsive, it was an act of love and courage. Mr. Reynolds, on the other hand, violated the trust of his family for his own interests, she concluded, her voice steady. Daniel's lawyer countered, attempting to paint Emily as a reckless spender who jeopardized her family's stability. But the weight of the evidence, coupled with the emotional testimonies from Emily's supporters, seemed to diminish his arguments. As the judge prepared to deliver his verdict, Emily felt a surge of emotions, fear, hope, and exhaustion from the weeks of battle. No matter the outcome, she knew she had fought with everything she had. The truth was out, and she could hold her head high. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed his notes, his measured gaze shifting between Emily and Daniel. The tension was palpable, each second stretching into an eternity. Emily gripped Rachel's hand under the table, her heart pounding as she braced for the decision that would shape her family's future. After reviewing the evidence and testimonies, this court finds that Mrs. Reynolds acted out of necessity and compassion in an extraordinary circumstance, the judge began, his voice steady. He turned to Daniel, his expression stern. Mr. Reynolds, the financial misconduct revealed during this trial demonstrates a clear breach of trust. Emily held her breath as the judge continued. Custody of the children was granted to her, ensuring their stability and well-being. Daniel was ordered to pay restitution for his mismanagement of funds and cover Emily's legal expenses. The judge's final words echoed in the room. This ruling is a reflection of the values that should guide a family: honesty, integrity, and care. Relief washed over Emily as tears welled in her eyes. After the verdict, Daniel approached Emily in the corridor, his once confident demeanor replaced by a shadow of regret. Emily, he began hesitantly, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. Emily turned to face him, her expression calm but resolute. You meant everything you did, Daniel, she replied. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. His eyes flickered with desperation. Can't we just fix this? For the kids, he asked, but Emily shook her head. No, Daniel. I've fought too hard to rebuild what you tried to tear apart. The kids deserve a father who values them, and maybe one day, you can be that for them. But not for me, she said firmly. Daniel's shoulders slumped as he nodded silently, walking away without another word. Life after the trial was not without challenges, but Emily embraced her newfound independence. She and her children moved into a small, sunlit townhouse near Chloe's apartment. The space was modest but filled with warmth, laughter, and the promise of brighter days. Emily threw herself into her work at the preschool, finding solace in her interactions with the children. Her co-workers admired her resilience, often stepping in to help when she needed time to adjust to her new routine. Slowly, Emily began to feel a sense of control over her life, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Evenings were spent with Lily and Evan, reading stories, playing games, and creating new memories. Emily cherished these moments, finding joy in the simple things that made their house a home. Though the scars of her battle remained, they reminded her of the strength she had found within herself. One afternoon, as Emily and Chloe chatted over coffee, Chloe brought up the lack of affordable daycare options in their neighborhood. You're so good with kids, Em. Have you ever thought about starting your own daycare? Chloe asked, her eyes lighting up. The idea seemed overwhelming at first, but it lingered in Emily's mind long after their conversation. That evening, she began jotting down ideas, envisioning a space where children could feel safe and loved while parents could work without worry. Over the next few weeks, Emily drafted a business plan, seeking advice from friends and colleagues. The more she worked on it, the more it felt like the right path. Starting a daycare wasn't just a way to support her family, it was a way to give back to the community that had supported her. Starting a daycare required funds Emily didn't have, so she applied for a small business grant. The process was rigorous, involving interviews, presentations, and countless forms. But Emily tackled each step with the same determination that had carried her through the trial. When the acceptance letter arrived, Emily wept with joy. The grant provided not only the financial support she needed but also validation of her vision. With the funds, she secured a small building and purchased supplies to create a nurturing, colorful space for children. As the daycare began to take shape, Emily felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. Her children helped decorate the rooms, their laughter echoing through the halls. For the first time since her life had been upended, Emily felt that she was building something truly meaningful, not just for her family, but for the entire community. The grand opening of Emily's daycare was a day filled with excitement and nervous anticipation. Parents, children, and neighbors gathered outside the small, brightly painted building, eager to see the new space Emily had created. Chloe stood beside her, holding Bella's hand and beaming with pride. As Emily cut the ribbon, applause erupted. The cheerful chatter of children exploring the playrooms and the warm smiles of parents made all the sleepless nights and hard work worthwhile. The daycare, named Little Haven, quickly became a safe space where families felt supported and valued. Emily's approach to childcare was deeply personal. She greeted every child by name, ensured the staff shared her nurturing values, and regularly hosted workshops for parents. The community embraced her vision, and the daycare flourished. For Emily, it was more than a business, it was a symbol of her resilience and the new life she had built. Months later, as Emily was tidying up after a busy day, she was startled by a familiar voice at the entrance. "Emily," Daniel said softly, standing in the doorway. He looked different, older, more worn. "I just wanted to see the place," he added, his gaze scanning the colorful walls and bustling play areas. Emily straightened, her expression neutral. "What do you want, Daniel?" she asked, keeping her tone measured. Daniel sighed, his hands shoved into his pockets. "I've lost everything, my job, my reputation. I came to apologize. For everything." His voice cracked with genuine remorse. Emily studied him for a moment, then said, "I accept your apology, Daniel. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. I've moved on, and so have the kids. If you want to be in their lives, you'll have to prove you've changed." Her words were firm yet kind, and as Daniel nodded, she felt a sense of closure. As Little Haven grew, so did Emily's reputation as a compassionate leader. Parents often stopped her to express their gratitude, sharing how her daycare had eased their burdens. Emily began organizing community events, from family fun days to parenting seminars, further solidifying the daycare's role as a cornerstone of the neighborhood. One evening, Lily and Evan presented Emily with a handmade card. Inside, in wobbly handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for everything, Mommy. You're our hero." Emily's heart swelled with emotion. Her journey had been fraught with challenges, but moments like these reminded her of the strength she had gained and the impact she was making. The success of Little Haven caught the attention of local officials, who invited Emily to join a committee focused on improving childcare services citywide. Though hesitant at first, Emily embraced the opportunity, eager to share her experiences and advocate for families in need. Through the committee, Emily connected with educators, social workers, and community leaders, expanding her vision and influence. She began mentoring other women, sharing her story of overcoming adversity to inspire them to pursue their own dreams. The work was challenging but deeply fulfilling, reinforcing her belief that every struggle she had faced had led her to this moment. Years later, as Emily prepared to pass the torch at Little Haven to a trusted colleague, she reflected on how far she had come. The daycare's vibrant walls now held decades of memories, and its halls had echoed with the laughter of countless children. It was a legacy she was proud to leave behind. Sitting in the quiet of her home, Emily smiled as she watched Lily and Evan, now young adults, preparing for their own futures. "You taught us what it means to be strong," Evan said one evening. "And to never give up," Lily added, hugging her mother tightly. As Emily walked through the neighborhood, she was greeted warmly by familiar faces, parents, children, and friends who had become part of her extended family. She realized that her story was no longer just about survival, it was about transformation, hope, and the power of choosing love and courage over fear. And as she closed the door on Little Haven one last time, she carried with her a heart full of gratitude, ready for whatever life had in store next.